Hello everybody, welcome back to another discussion video on the Pandora Hearts Manga by Jun Mochizuki. This is on volume number 12. If you're new to this series, two rules about it. First of all, filled with spoilers for this volume as well as all the volumes that came before it. So if you have not read up to and including volume 12 of Pandora Hearts and you want to stay spoiler free, don't watch this video. Second rule is I make these videos after I finish reading this volume, so I don't read ahead when I'm making this sort of video. So as I talk things out and sort of guess at things that I think are happening, it really is just me guessing because I have no idea what happens beyond this volume as I'm making this video. So let's get right into it because a lot of stuff happened in volume number 12. Some of it, some big reveals, some of it, a lot of questions, creating new questions, and a lot of it, some really great choice character moments. So let's start right off with one of my greatest character moments that I loved, and that is the revelation of Ada Vessalius. So we start off with the Baskervilles having this discussion with Vincent, and we've kind of known that Vincent is working with the Baskervilles and sort of working behind the scenes, but we weren't too sure exactly what his purpose in this whole thing was. We know that the Baskervilles are seeking out the seals and they're trying to break those so they can find Glenn, but we didn't really know how Vincent played into their plan. Well, now we do. Vincent is being used, or as volunteered. I'm still not too sure about how exactly Vincent and the Baskervilles tie together, but nonetheless, Vincent is trying to find the keys that each of the dukes own that opens the door to their particular door of the abyss. Now, the keys we find out are essentially just balls of energy that can be infused into anything. So it could be a knife, it could be a pen, it could be a rock, it could be pretty much anything. And so Vincent tells the Baskervilles, listen, I can't go after Duke Barma because of this. I can't go after Duke Nightray because of this. I, can't go after the, I can never remember Sharon's family's name, but I can't go after them because they're scary as hell. But you know what? Oscar Vessalius is weak because of his big heart and his love for those who are closest to him, because of his love of Oz and Gil and Ada. And he says, and basically we find out that this is the reason that Vincent has pursued a romance with Ada Vessalius, is to try and basically make her his pawn so he can find out where the key that the Vessalius family owns is to their door of the abyss. And we get the little backstory about how Vincent first met Ada, and of course he's searching for her. And he talks about how women are vapid and everything else. And we have this moment where he mentions Ada's eyes and that he sees the light of him, his light, in her eyes, and how it reminds him of his own guilt. And so I kind of get the sense that Vincent's feelings that he wants to destroy Ada, it isn't really that he has these hard feelings towards her specifically. I think there's a little good element of his own self-loathing and hatred for himself mixed into all of those feelings. But this whole exchange basically leads up to Vincent and Ada on a date in the opera. And Vincent's coming on pretty strong, and we essentially are led to believe that he's convinced Ada to sleep with him, especially when they arrive at a house that Ada says is entirely for her use, and because her father doesn't want her bringing her friends to the main house. Now, at this moment, this is where I love this manga, and it's a pretty good sort of encapsulated way and an example of what makes this series so cool. So we have, up to this moment, every reason to believe that Vincent is going to succeed. He's going to sleep with Ada. It's going to take their relationship to a much more complicated level, and God knows how he's going to corrupt her from here. Instead, we find out that Ada is actually into the occult and torture and all of this. We get this crazed look on her face, and even the font that they use for her to say, "This is who I really am," is all, mucked up and everything else. And Vincent clearly has no idea how to handle this, freaks right out, but then eventually regains his composure. But it's very clear that the whole sleeping with each other thing does not in any way happen, and Vincent now finds himself a little unsure of exactly how he's going to approach this girl. And like I said, it's really fun, and this is the thing that I love about this series, that it builds you up to a certain expectation, and you're like, this is where a lot of other manga and a lot of other anime and types of things would go to, and then it just kind of flips it on its head a little bit and introduces a new element to a character that you were not expecting, or at least I certainly wasn't expecting it. Like up to that point, I was like, oh, Ada, no, come on, don't, no. And then I couldn't help but bust out a gut and laugh. Like, that was awesome. But it makes sense because when she explains to Vincent how she got into it, we realize that her character up to this point is of the loving sister, that she is so devoted and loving of Oz. And it makes sense that when he disappeared into the abyss, she would seek out any information she could to try and rescue him. And of course, the abyss being what it is, it's no wonder it led her to the occult. And she just became enamored with it. So again, a really cool thing. It flips our expectations around, but yet it's still true to the character themselves. We also get a little conversation from this. We segue into it where Vincent looks almost hungover after he's had to deal with 5 hours, apparently, of discussing the occult with Ada. And, Gil comes in and he's sort of like, I just wanted to make sure you were okay, that everything's fine because, the headhunter is back. And it's clear that there's still sort of this brotherly feeling between them. I think in previous volumes, it seemed like their relationship was quite a bit more strained, in that I think Gil even felt a little bit wary of Vincent. But since he's now sort of remembered what's happened, now that he went into Sablier and had that experience within sort of the Abyss dream, that he remembers sort of more about his past, he seems a little bit more compassionate and a little bit more willing to approach Vincent, and really does seem concerned about his safety. And he ends again by saying again, Vincent, do you remember anything about our past? And Vincent says no, and we know pretty much that's probably a lie. But, Vincent says, no, I told you that already, I don't. And Gil says, well, when you do, please tell me, because we need to talk honestly about it. And I thought that was a really good moment. And we do know that Vincent remembers their past, because Vincent even himself has sort of this moment where he says to himself, this is why I loved Gil, and this is why I'm so devoted to Gil. And he actually asks the question, why did you not just throw me away? Why did you throw Gil away too? Because he wasn't one, he didn't have a red eye, he would have been a perfect child. Why did you throw him away too? Which is a very, very interesting question. And I'm not too sure that we're going to find out. Well, we will find out the answer. I'm pretty confident at this point that most of our questions, if not all of them, are going to be answered. So I'm giving Mochizuki the benefit of the doubt here that we will have our questions answered. So again, we have now sort of this other question that I didn't really have before. I mean, I guess I should have thought of it, but I didn't really think like, oh, why did they throw both boys? Why did they not just throw Vincent away? Why did they throw Gil away too? But now it's a question in my mind, something else to try and ponder, which at this point I don't really know. I don't really know the answer. I still kind of feel that somehow the identities of Gil and Vincent somehow still tie more into the other families, and I'm still not too sure exactly how that's going to play out. Next, we go to Sharon going in to visit with her grandmother. Her grandmother has summoned her and basically is like, I just want to check on you because you saw something pretty crazy and horrific, and I want to make sure that you're okay. And essentially, Sharon is like, yeah, you know what? I realize that I need to be stronger, and I realize these things about myself. But yes, you know what? I'm actually okay. Like, I'm able to move forward. And she leaves, and the grandmother says to Break, are you satisfied? Are you happy? And he says, yep. And so the grandmother says, now tell me what you found out about Oz Vessalius's past. And this is probably, like I would say, this is probably one of the biggest bombshells in this whole volume, is that we find out that when Oz Vessalius was born, all the doctors and nurses that were involved with his birth have disappeared, and that Break essentially just managed to get out of Oscar that as soon as the child was born, Vessalius, the father, whisked the child out into this dark and stormy evening and didn't return for some time. And then when he did return, he said, well, I just wanted to perform, like, the sacraments or whatever, or the blessing, the christening by myself right away. And I mean, it's very questionable, obviously. And Brake says it, and then we see even Oscar sort of contemplating this idea that maybe Oz Vessalius, the boy that they know, isn't really the Oz Vessalius that was born to Zai and his wife. Now, this sort of raises a question, because in the last video I was saying, like, maybe we had learned that Oz's existence seemed to be mainly to hide the essence of Jack Vessalius. And I said, well, maybe that was why his father hated him. Maybe that was done without Zai Vessalius's say-so or his permission. But now we see that it was actually Zai that whisked the child away and did God knows what with it. So I'm still kind of in a quandary as to why it is that he sees Oz as this terrible thing. The only thing that I can think of is that it sort of speaks to one of my other ideas about how this may have gone down, was that he thought one thing was going to happen, but in fact something else happened. Now, the one thing that I pondered as I was reading this is I was thinking back to the whole thing about the in-cues and about how Oz's in-cues is visible, and the only other person whose in-cues is visible at all times is Brake's, because it's gone all the way around. And we know that a person who's had their in-cues go all the way around is dragged into the abyss and becomes a chain. Now, is it possible that somehow a contract was made either with the infant that tied a chain to it, or was the child replaced with a chain? Because let's remember, Alice appears to be entirely human, even though she is supposedly a chain, which even now I'm sort of waffling about whether that's actually true. I'm not too sure. But supposedly, there are chains that can take human form. So is it possible that a chain could grow from an infant into a boy, into a man, and everything else, and not even be aware of what it actually is? So this is kind of where I was thinking this thing, because we know that chains are tied to people, right? So if perhaps, is it possible that Oz is a chain, and that they used a chain to contract or tie to Jack Vessalius's essence? The only thing that I'm not too sure of is why would they do that? Because this is like when Oz is born, it's 25 years ago, because there was that 10-year gap and blah, blah, blah. So it's like 75 years after Sablier. And if it's 75 years, why did they wait that long? Like, what was it about the birth of Oz Vessalius, or what was it about the timing of Oz Vessalius's birth that specifically tied into Jack Vessalius and his essence? Or is this perhaps something that's been hereditary along the lines? I mean, if Jack died, there could have been an infant Vessalius born at the point where Jack died, and they could have died, if they had been born just shortly after Jack died, they would have been, died like in their 70s or whatever, and could have died just before Oz was born. And if Zai knew this, then Zai, maybe he did something about it. Because we know Zai is tied into the Baskervilles, and we know that obviously he's sort of on board with them about this whole thing with Jack, and not allowing Jack Vessalius to fall into other people's hands in order to control the intention of the Abyss. So maybe he knew, and that was why he sought to eliminate the child or to replace the child. I don't know. Like, this is, again, like, these things there's a lot of different possibilities at this point. But it is a huge reveal, and I'm sure is going to have major ramifications further down the line. So we go from discussing Oz to actually rejoining Oz and party, and they find out that Oz has a visitor in Rhyme's office, or Rame's office, and so they go, and it's Elliot, and he wants to know everything they know about the headhunter, because of course he knows that they were there. And so this is where we get sort of a bit of the reveal of the box that Oz was given in the last volume from the descendant of the magician. And we find out that it was filled with papers that had all these symbols and writing and stuff that really Oz had no idea what it was. But he says that Duke Barma reacted to one particular thing, and he draws it for Elliot, which is like a stake with a snake wrapped around it. And Elliot's like, you know what? I do recall this, but I just, I don't remember where it's from. And shortly after this, Alice, this is another one of those, I think Glenn is in Elliot, or somehow Elliot is tied into this whole thing, because Alice sniffs Elliot and she says, it smells familiar, but somehow a bit different. I can't place it, right? And we know that Alice lived with Glenn, so it's totally possible that she could be smelling that element of Glenness in Elliot, which we have had very, very heavy overtones that he is, in fact, the bearer of the locked soul of Glenn Baskerville. And then we have Gil, and then, of course, like Elliot says, well, I want this information. I'm going to hunt down this headhunter and take it out. And Gil is like, you can't do that. You're not even a contractor. You can't go against this thing. And they start to fight, and then Oscar busts in and is like, you know what? Enough fighting. It's a beautiful day. We're having a tea party. And we had all these characters, including Echo, the return of Echo. I'm guessing Echo is back because Zwei got his ass kicked by Break. And maybe that's sort of like how they heal, you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's the whole thing. Like, when Zwei is injured, his personality sort of withdraws, and that allows his body. It's almost like I almost wonder if it's beyond like a multiple personality thing with them. Is it almost like two distinct bodies tied together somehow? And that's how Echo can appear to not be injured, even though Zwei obviously had massive injuries inflicted onto him by Break. So Echo is back, which is awesome. We get a really cute sort of conversation with Oz and Elliot and them sort of talking about how they need to break society's expectations that House Vessalius and House Night Ray don't get along. And Elliot makes the statement that, you know what, I've been told all these things by my father, but the more that I see things with my own eyes, the more I question if that's the way things really are. And he says, even in regards to the headhunter, I don't want to go and get revenge and just kill this thing. I want to capture it. I want to understand what this was all about and what the point of it all was, and then I will turn it over to be judged by the laws of mankind. Also about this tea party now, again, I don't know if this is just like a really nice little character thing or whether this is going to play a bigger role, but Oscar says, okay, everybody line up. We're going to take a picture to remember this great tea party and this great day and that we're all friends. And Oz sees this camera and he realizes that it's the camera that Oscar bought so that he could use it for the very first time taking a picture of his child, who his wife was going to bear for him. And, we find out that she was quite sickly, but she still wanted to have their child. And Oscar supported her and everything else. And it's made pretty clear that she and the child died during childbirth. And it might not even have been childbirth. It could have been that she miscarried and the bleeding and everything else did her in as well. I mean, we don't know the real details, and I don't think we really necessarily need to know per se unless it somehow ties into the bigger story. But so Oz is like, you can't use that camera. And Oscar's like, nope, you know what? You're my precious son. He actually says that, which, time-wise, it doesn't work that Oscar's child could have been switched with Oz, but there was almost a part of me that I was like, could he actually be Oscar's kid? But Oscar would know that. Like, we wouldn't have seen Oscar sitting there going, did Cy switch the kids? Like, he would know, I would guess, if, he was using that wording. He's just using it because that is how he sees Oz. I guess what we see again, right, is it's these fractured relationships. Oscar had a wife that obviously he loved very deeply, and he lost her, and that's why he acts a bit like a womanizer, because he can't find anybody else to fill that hole. But yet with Oz needs a father. He wants a father, but his own father isn't there for him. And Oscar desperately wanted to have a family, and so Oz is like the surrogate child that he could not have. And so you see where they're really filling in mutually this need with each other for that type of relationship. And it's really nice, you know. That's the one thing that I really like about this series as well, is that there's really these great little character moments as well that convey so much emotion and depth of feeling. Like I said, even like in the last volume where Break revealed that he was blind, and when he talks about not regretting it, there's just that one image of Sharon smiling, and you can tell that that's like the only thing that he's going to regret not being able to see properly. So after the dinner party, Elliot goes back home, gets in big crap from his sister because she's like, "You're an idiot. The headhunter's out there. You're wandering around." And we meet a brand new character who is, and I'm going to have to actually look it up, Isla Yura. I can't remember the name. Isla Yura, and we realize that he's wearing a medallion that is the stake with a snake through it. And it is apparently the symbol of some kind of religious cult that the Night Ray's mom is involved with. Now, this is where this got a little weird for me. I couldn't quite figure it out because it seemed like the Barmas are dukes of this nation, whatever nation it is, but yet they say that Isla Yura is from another nation, but the Barmas have, I don't know if it's just that the Barmas have ancient roots there, and they've become a wealthy and influential family within this nation, but because of their original roots, they still have ties to the other one. I think that's kind of how it rolls, but I didn't quite get a very clear picture of exactly how it worked that the Barmas could hold such influence in the one nation and yet still have these somewhat ties to this other nation, so much so that Isla Yura would be a representative of this other nation and would feel that he could approach Duke Barma very openly about why he's there and what he's doing. And we find out that essentially the other nation is very worried about the fact that there's access to the chains. We find out the abyss is only in this one nation, that the doors to the abyss and the chains, they only exist in this one nation, and that this other nation are quite concerned about it. And Isla Yura, though, is much more like Barma. He's like, I don't even really care about those kind of things. All I really care about is information. And I want to find out like what really happened. I want to find out what's going on. And I hear that, you know, perhaps the soul of Jack Vessalius has been revealed. And, you know, because Elliot told Oz and company that, you know, this Isla Yura guy was going to meet with Duke Barma and, you know, he had the symbol, they've snuck into Duke Barma's mansion, and Barma basically is like, just ends up revealing that, yeah, he knows they're there. And Isla Yura is like falling all over himself because Oz is there. And he basically is like, it's great and all that you say that Jack Vessalius is there, but show me with my own eyes. And Oz, you know, is like, Jack, come out, blah, blah, blah. And then Oz goes to stab himself and stops himself. And then we see that switch, you know, like I said, like the art that Mochizuki does, it shows you that switch in personality in Oz. And then he recites this incantation that has to do with the silver stake and wrap it with a snake and everything else. And this convinces Isla Yura that, you know, Jack Vessalius is real. And he says to Oz, you have to come to my mansion. You have to come. And because of politics and everything else, they basically decide that he can't just go and visit, but that Isla Yura, if he is hosting a coming out party, like a coming out to society party in Oz's honor, that this will allow them to sort of sidestep the politics and social norms of their society. So the final stage of this manga takes place then at the mansion of Isla Yura, and I'll try and sort of just glaze over some of this stuff because I didn't think that there was a lot of real reveals in this. I think it was just like a lot more hints about what's going to happen next. So we find out that Leo is tied to Isla Yura and that there is something very suspicious going on at the orphanage that is set outside of Sablier. In fact, one of the children there has died, and Leo says, what, that's 6, I think he says. And Isla Yura's like, oh, I'm sure the children will forget, just like how, what's his name? Philippe forgot that his father was dead. So we have this sort of side thing going on with Leo, and what's his tie to Isla Yura, and why is Isla Yura tied into this orphanage along with the Night Ray family, and what's going on with the kids there, and why are they dying? And from there, we also have Raim is going to investigate the house because they believe that there is another seal, which it's made very obvious that there is. In fact, there's a whole bunch of cloaked individuals looking like they're worshiping the seal. I'm guessing these are cult members that Isla Yura kind of hints that, yes, he's invited a bunch of guests. And so clearly these people are there because Jack Vessalius has come to reclaim his body. So we have that going on, and as Raim is going along and looking, he runs into the newest Baskerville who escaped from the abyss just last episode, and she has a chain that is feeding on dead bodies, and it's made pretty clear to the reader that these people were already dead, and then we find out why they were dead, and we find out that the headhunter is there. Now, in this other thing, of course, there's all sorts of really great little character moments in this. We have Brake revealing to Sharon that he's blind. And we have Alice dancing with Oz and this, really cute thing where everybody's like, oh, that girl's so beautiful. What house is she from? And so we have all these little character moments that are happening along the way, but then we end with this threat of the headhunter and this very ominous shadow on the wall. And so this is where the volume ends for us with, like, what's going to happen? All of our characters are in one location. We have this incredibly violent killer in the location with them. We have another seal. And I'm kind of thinking that I don't think our characters might get involved with the headhunter as much, but I'm kind of thinking the headhunter is going to take care of all of those followers that are kneeling in front of the seal. I think they're in for a whole world of head chopping. So we'll see what happens in volume number 13. Again, guys, a great volume. So many things revealed, but really, like I said, I didn't feel like they were major answers. I kind of felt like this time around it was a little bit more tidbits that just added a little breadcrumb to the trail, but it really didn't provide answers, just sort of made the questions that we're asking a little bit more pointed now, right? So before it was all about just what was Oz and is Oz and all that. Now we know that Oz could be someone completely other than the child that was born. So that kind of changes the line of thinking again, right? So that's where I feel that this volume went with. It created new questions, but sort of changed the kind of questions that we're asking, and then gave us some really, really great little character moments, sort of little twists and turns with our favorite characters, and then left us with a hell of a cliffhanger that I want to end this video and sit right down and read volume number 13. And I will be back here next week with that video. Thanks so much for hanging in there on these long freaking videos. Like, I still feel always rushed and like I've left so much out. Feel free, throw things in the discussion. Let's talk about it. If there's anything I forgot that you want to talk about, absolutely, let's do it down in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye for now.